and witness a man who chose love over wealth and a child who finally discovered what a safe home feels like. Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to our channel. Daniel Berger was at the top of the business world. Powerful, respected, always in control. He was sitting in a private corner of a luxury restaurant, discussing the final details of yet another massive deal with his partners. Everything was running smoothly. The evening flowed as elegantly as the wine on the menu. But Daniel's mind wasn't as clear as the conversation at his table. Lately, there'd been a strange emptiness inside him. No matter how much money he made, something always felt missing. He slowly swirled the wine in his glass and let out a quiet sigh. It was supposed to be just another night, until he heard a small voice. "Excuse me, sir." He looked up and locked eyes with a little girl, maybe 8 years old. Long, wavy blonde hair, and the kind of deep blue eyes that stop you in your tracks. She was holding a crumpled napkin, standing there shy but determined. Daniel glanced around. A child in a place like this? Alone? That wasn't normal. Where was her mother? What was she even doing here? "Are you lost?" he asked gently. She shook her head. "No." Then she slowly raised her trembling wrist. Daniel's breath caught. On her wrist was a birthmark, identical to his own. Same shape, same spot. The noise of the restaurant disappeared. The clinking glasses, the chatter. Everything went silent. And then, in a whisper, she said, "My mom told me, if I ever see someone with this mark, he might be my dad." Her words hit like a thunderclap. Daniel tightened his grip on the wine glass. Blue eyes, just like his. And now, this child standing before him like a ghost from a past he thought he'd buried. Could this be real? "What did you just say?" His voice was lower now, almost unsure. She repeated it, without hesitation. "My mom said, if I ever see someone with the same birthmark, I should tell him. Because maybe he's my dad." Something in him cracked. He stared at her. Those golden curls. That gaze. That posture. There was no denying it. And suddenly, a possibility he had buried long ago came roaring back to life. "Who's your mother?" he asked, barely above a whisper. The girl answered quietly. "Anna Winter." That name. It hit him like a punch to the chest. He hadn't heard it in years, but he'd never forgotten it. Anna. She had meant so much to him, once. But he had chosen ambition over love. And he left her behind. He stood up. His business partners looked confused. But Daniel only had eyes for the little girl. "Where is your mother now?" he asked. She clutched the napkin tighter. "She passed away last month." Daniel felt the air leave his lungs. Anna was gone. And this child, standing here with eyes that mirrored his own, was all that remained. This wasn't just a business dinner anymore. This was fate reaching across time. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Sophie." He closed his eyes for a second. He had never heard that name before, but somehow, it touched something deep in his heart. He noticed the stares from around the restaurant. This conversation didn't belong here. He knelt down and placed a hand gently on Sophie's shoulder. "Would you come with me?" he asked softly. She hesitated for just a moment, then nodded. And just like that, for the first time in his life, Daniel walked away from a deal, not as a businessman, but as a man who might finally be a father. And that possibility felt heavier than everything he'd ever owned. As Daniel's car left the city lights behind, Sophie sat quietly in the passenger seat. Her small hands gripped the seatbelt like she was afraid someone might suddenly ask her to get out. Daniel kept glancing at her while holding the steering wheel tight. But he had no idea what to say. This was a man who had handled multi-million-dollar crises, walked out of ruthless negotiations with victory in hand. Yet tonight, a little girl sitting next to him had broken through every wall he ever built. After a long silence, he finally asked, "Where were you staying?" Sophie kept her eyes on the window. "With Miss Karen. She was my mom's neighbor. After she passed, Miss Karen took me in. But," her voice got softer, "she said I couldn't stay forever." Daniel's throat tightened. His own daughter, his flesh and blood, was left with a neighbor after her mother died. And he had no idea. No letter. No phone call. No warning. Why had Anna stayed silent? The city lights reflecting on the window carved deeper lines into Daniel's face. "Did your mom ever talk about me?" he asked quietly. Sophie looked down. She said she wanted to, but she thought, maybe you weren't ready, that you were busy, that you had another life. Daniel clenched his jaw. Even now Anna had protected him. She hadn't turned her daughter against him. She hid the truth not out of spite, but maybe out of quiet disappointment. So, why now, he asked. Why come to me now? Sophie lifted her wrist, the birthmark. That same familiar shape. Because no one else has this. And my mom said, if someone did, he might be my dad. Her words were simple but devastating. Daniel's chest ached. This little girl was trying to rewrite her life based on a birthmark. That kind of bravery and loneliness. They pulled up to Daniel's high-security residence. As the gates opened, Sophie's eyes widened in awe. Inside, the house was sleek and modern, tall ceilings, pristine walls. For years, it had been Daniel's fortress. Cold, orderly, emotionless. But now, with the sound of small footsteps echoing through the hall, it didn't feel so silent anymore. This place, it's really big, Sophie whispered. Daniel gave a small smile. Yeah, big, quiet. Her next question hit him hard. Do you live here alone? I do. His voice was low and thick with something he didn't want to name. Sophie nodded. Then slowly, like she was stepping into somewhere she wasn't allowed, she walked forward. Daniel led her upstairs, showed her one of the guest rooms. Crisp white sheets, plain furniture, a room no child would dream of. Sophie stood in the middle of it. Thank you, she said politely, but her voice sounded far away. Then she turned and asked, Are you going to keep me? The question was a knife to the heart. A child her age should never have to ask that. What do you mean? Daniel said, his voice catching. Miss Karen. She wasn't sure. She said maybe you wouldn't want me. Because I wasn't in your life before. Daniel dropped to one knee, looking her in the eyes. Sophie, not want you? Since the moment I found you, I haven't thought about anything else. You're here now. And this is your home. Sophie didn't look away. Promise me. Daniel didn't hesitate. I promise. For the first time, something in her face softened, as if she'd just set down a weight she'd been carrying for months. She climbed into bed quietly and pulled the covers up. Daniel turned to leave, but then he heard her voice. Good night. Dad. His hand froze on the doorknob. That word dad. It was the first time anyone had ever said it to him. It was heavy, but holy. Without turning around, he replied, Good night, Sophie. He turned off the light and gently closed the door behind him. And in that moment, he knew he was no longer alone. For maybe the first time in his life, Daniel Berger woke up without a plan. No buzzing phone, no rushing to meetings. And the first thing on his mind wasn't business. It was the little girl upstairs. His daughter, Sophie. That one sentence from last night still echoed in his mind. Are you going to keep me? He woke up early, like always. But instead of diving into his usual morning routine, he quietly made his way upstairs. Sophie's door was slightly open. He could hear soft movement from inside. He knocked gently. Sophie, a small voice replied. You can come in. When Daniel opened the door, he found her on the floor, neatly folding the clothes they had just bought. She was placing them one by one on the bed with careful precision, as if tidying her shirts helped tidy her heart too. You don't have to do that, Daniel said gently. I have people who take care of the laundry. Sophie shrugged. I'm used to it. My mom always did everything herself. She taught me to do the same. Daniel's chest tightened. She was so mature for her age. Too much life for someone so young. Did you sleep okay last night? He asked. She nodded. I fell asleep while you were reading. Thank you. That strange ache in Daniel's chest came rushing back. If you'd like, I can read again tonight, he offered. She looked surprised. Okay, she said simply, but her softened tone told him the first layer of her walls had cracked. Well, Daniel smiled. Time for breakfast. Is it ready? Sophie asked as they walked toward the stairs. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Not yet. Because this morning, we're making pancakes. Sophie froze. You're making pancakes? Yes. Seriously? She tried not to laugh, but the corners of her mouth betrayed her. In the kitchen, Daniel got to work very seriously. He had the box of pancake mix, milk, eggs. He squinted at the measurements, flipped the box over twice to reread the instructions, then dumped everything into a bowl and started mixing. Sophie sat at the marble island, resting her chin on her hands, watching him with curiosity. My mom used to make pancakes all the time, she said softly. But yours looks kind of complicated. Daniel glanced up. Are you a critic or a coach? Sophie gave a solemn nod. If you flip them too soon, they'll fall apart. The edges have to bubble first. Daniel chuckled. Sounds like you're the pancake expert here. The first one wasn't bad. The second better. By the third, Sophie clapped quietly. When they sat down, Daniel placed pancakes on her plate and handed over the maple syrup. She took a bite, chewing slowly while watching him. Well, he asked. Sophie set her fork down. Not like my mom's. But not bad. Daniel laughed. I think that's a compliment. She nodded. You made them yourself. So, maybe they're even better. And then Daniel saw it. For the first time, a real smile on Sophie's face. It wasn't forced. It wasn't polite. It was real. And in that moment, he felt a kind of joy no business victory had ever given him. After breakfast, Sophie quietly set down her fork. What happens now? She asked. Daniel placed his coffee cup on the table. Now, we go get your things. From Miss Karen's house. Sophie paused. Okay, she said at last. But the look on her face twisted something inside Daniel again. It was as if she didn't dare be happy. Like she'd learned to expect that joy always came with an expiration date. And Daniel swore to himself, this time, it won't. For the first time in his life, Daniel Berger found himself driving into a neighborhood to pick up a child's things. It was far from the glass towers and polished offices he was used to. A small street, quiet and modest. When he parked the car, Sophie sat silently in the passenger seat. Her fingers were nervously bunching up the fabric of her dress as she stared at the small garden in front of the house. The wooden fence needed a new coat of paint, but there were fresh flowers by the gate. Simple, warm, lived in. An older woman stood waiting at the door, hands gently clasped in front of her. Sophie hesitated before opening the door. Miss Karen, she said softly, her voice filled with emotion. The woman opened her arms. My sweet girl. Sophie stepped forward and hugged her tightly. Daniel stood back and watched them. Something settled in the center of his chest, a mixture of gratitude and guilt. Miss Karen looked over at him. So, you're the father. Daniel gave a small nod. Yes. She didn't let go of Sophie as she stepped closer. Anna never told you, did she? Daniel's jaw tightened. No, never. The woman let out a long sigh. She wanted to, many times. But she thought it would scare you, that you didn't want to know. Or maybe it was just too late. Daniel looked away. She wasn't wrong. Back then, he hadn't wanted to know. But now he was staring at his past, in the form of a little girl. Sophie was quietly watching them. Miss Karen turned to her. I packed everything, sweetie. We can get it when you're ready. Sophie nodded. Can Daddy come too? The woman's face lit up. Of course. Inside the house, everything was the opposite of Daniel's home. It was small, with floral wallpaper on the walls, books on every shelf, and a tea ring on the coffee table. But it was warm, real, full of life. Sophie's bag was small. A few clothes, 2 stuffed animals, and a framed photo of her mother. Anna's smile frozen in time. Daniel stared at it. So many years gone. A whole life. Lost in between. Before they left, Miss Karen knelt down in front of Sophie. Everything's going to be okay, sweetheart. But you can always call me, anytime. Don't forget that. Sophie nodded. Her lips trembled, but she didn't cry. Maybe she had already cried too much. They hugged tightly. Then Sophie walked over to Daniel. Back in the car, they sat in silence for a while. Daniel started the engine, but didn't drive off right away. You ready? He asked. Sophie looked out the window. I think so. Daniel leaned in a little. Coming to get your things isn't just a task, Sophie. It's about saying goodbye to the past and making room for what's next. I'm with you. We can stop anytime you need to. She turned to him. There was still something hiding in her eyes, but not a shadow. More like a flicker of light trying to grow. I want you to be with me, she said slowly. But I'm scared one day you'll leave. Daniel shook his head. I'm not going anywhere. She paused, then nodded gently. Okay. They didn't talk much on the drive back, but the silence didn't feel heavy anymore. It was healing, a quiet step toward something new. When they got home, Sophie placed her few toys in the corner of the room. She set the photo of her mom beside the bed. Daniel stood in the doorway watching. The room was still simple and bare, but now it had a soul, a small, quiet mark of belonging. Then, suddenly, she turned around. Can we paint my room? Daniel blinked. What color were you thinking? Sky blue. He smiled. First thing tomorrow we'll go buy paint. And Sophie smiled back, without hesitation. And at that moment, Daniel knew. This wasn't a temporary visit. This was a beginning. A real home. A real family. The next morning, Daniel Berger did something completely unfamiliar. He didn't open his emails. He didn't join any CEO meetings. He didn't review a single report. Today, He had just one thing on his agenda: turning Sophie's room into her room. They went to the paint store together. Sophie picked a shade of blue, not too childish, not too pale. It looked like the sky just after sunrise. Quiet, hopeful. They bought brushes, rollers, a few posters, and some colorful throw pillows. Daniel had never shopped like this before. Every confident decision he normally made was replaced by a sweet uncertainty. This rug or that one. Simple questions, but new to him. For Sophie, though, this wasn't strange anymore, because she was home now. When they returned, Daniel was the first to dip his hands into the paint bucket. No tie, no ironed shirt, just a white t-shirt getting covered in blue splatters. And for once, he smiled through the mess. Sophie rolled the paint onto the walls with care. Every stroke held a memory, a longing, a bit of hope. "We never had a real room," she said quietly. "Mom and I shared a bed. I never complained, though, because she was there." Daniel stopped mid-stroke, the brush hanging in the air. "As long as I'm here, this will be your place," he said. Sophie nodded, but she wasn't done. She glanced up and asked softly, "Can I want you to be there, too?" Daniel's voice caught in his chest. "Of course, for as long as you want me." By the end of the day, the room was bathed in blue. Still simple, but now full of warmth. Posters were on the walls. Colorful pillows lined the bed. Her books sat neatly by the window. For dinner, they ordered pizza. They sat at the table together. The conversation was short, but meaningful. Sophie left the crusts on her plate. Daniel noticed and ended up eating every one. The first unspoken father-daughter tradition had begun. That night, after brushing her teeth, Sophie climbed into bed. Her mom's photo rested on the nightstand. When Daniel appeared in the doorway, she asked in a quiet voice, "Will you read to me again tonight?" Daniel smiled, holding a freshly chosen book in his hand. "Every night, until you tell me to stop." She sat up in bed and pulled the blanket to her lap. Daniel sat beside her and began to read. The story's hero journeyed bravely through the dark until he found the sun, and as Sophie listened, her eyelids began to flutter. Just before she fell asleep, she whispered, "Daddy." Daniel paused. "Yes." She smiled, eyes still closed. "This is my home now, right?" He leaned in and whispered back, "Wherever you go, that's home. But yes, this is yours." He turned off the lamp and gently pulled the door shut. As he walked down the stairs, he felt something unfamiliar, a lightness in his chest. Deals, wealth, power. None of it had ever given him peace like this. He was no longer just Daniel Berger. He was a father. And maybe, just maybe, life had saved its greatest treasure for the day an 8-year-old girl looked him in the eye and called him Dad. Weeks after Sophie's room was painted blue, the entire house felt different. A new kind of life had moved in. There was now a pair of tiny pink slippers resting in the living room. The pancake mix in the kitchen was almost gone, and Daniel no longer woke up to the smell of coffee, but to a soft little voice saying, "Good morning, Daddy." Some forms of wealth are kept in vaults. Others begin the moment a child looks at you and says, "Stay." Daniel's greatest investment wasn't part of any plan. But life doesn't always follow plans. And sometimes, it leads us exactly where we're meant to be.